Hi, I'm Lynette and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be ranking all of my Juvia's Place eyeshadow palettes. Now this isn't a new concept. I've seen it going around on YouTube. Kelsey Brianna J is the one that says she started the whole ranking thing. I'm just going to take her word for it. So today I decided I would join in on the fun and rank my Juvia's Place eyeshadow palettes. And it was no simple task because I have 16 palettes from Juvia's. Yes, 16. And I have done a tutorial on 15 of them, all but one, and that's my most recent purchase, the Warrior 3 palette. But I do have a playlist that is linked down below of all the tutorials I've done with all the other palettes. And yeah, if you're interested to see what I did with them, by all means at any point go onto the channel and watch the playlist. So let's get to ranking these palettes. So if you've been here before, if you follow me at all here on this channel, you already know what my number one palette is. But I'm going to start with the ones that I like the least and work my way up to my favorite. Okay, and when I say like the least, I'll just say that all of the palettes, like I said, I've used all of them but one. Some of them one time, many of them multiple times. And when I say I like it the least, it's not because of the quality. For the most part, the quality is consistent amongst all the palettes. There may be a couple of palettes, maybe one or two palettes that have one or two shades in them that either are duds or aren't so great. But for the most part, Juvia's Place is very consistent with their formula. Their mattes are very pigmented and very blendable. Their metallics are very blingy and shiny and shimmery, and yeah, and that's why I have so many of the palettes, because they are really good quality for a really good affordable price. Now let's get to the dirty work. The first palette I am going to talk about, and it's the one that I like the least, so it is the one that's on the bottom of the pile. I have a whole pile stacked right here next to me. And it is also my most recent purchase. It's the one I haven't used yet, the only one I haven't used yet, and it is the Warrior 3. And this is what she looks like. And of course the packaging for all of these palettes is absolutely gorgeous. Okay, so same with this one. Beautiful, beautiful packaging. It took me a while to buy this palette because really I was only interested in these three shades right down here, these three blue shades. This one looks gray in the pan, but it's like a gray blue, and then you have these really colorful shades in the first two rows. And I feel like I know that these shades aren't identical to any of the other shades in the Juvia's Place palettes, because Juvia's Place does a really good job of not repeating their shades. They may be very similar, but as far as I know, none of them are exactly the same. But every time I look at this palette, I feel like I have all of these colors or some variations of this color of these colors in my other Juvia's Place palettes. So they don't really excite me, and as we go along you'll see too that, you know, this is not, it's kind of common, but these three shades are not, and these are the three shades that I've been most interested in. But every time I open this palette and I swatch it, and I usually just swatch these three shades right here and you know, I like to do in my tutorials with the Juvia's Place palettes in particular, I like to use just the palette to create a look, and I really haven't come up yet with a look that I would create with just the shadows in this palette. So that's why it hasn't been used, and because of the fact that it hasn't been used and I've had it since I want to say the Black Friday blackout of 2019, This one is number 16 on the list. Next up is another one of the Juvia's Place palettes that took me a long time to purchase because I wasn't really feeling it, and it's also a part of the Warrior series, and this one is the Warrior 2, and this is their Juvia's Place's only all matte neutral palette. And she looks like this. I think this may be the only, yes, this is the only all matte palette from Juvia's Place. And it is, as you see, it's all neutral. And I have nothing against neutrals. I'll admit that, you know, an all neutral palette doesn't usually excite me as much as a colorful palette. But it took me a long time to buy this palette because it was an all neutral palette. And I just was like, eh. But I got it because I felt like, you know, neutrals are important to have in any makeup collection, any eyeshadow collection. And I thought it would be nice to have matte neutral shadows all in one palette. And I'm sure they will be pigmented enough to show up on my skin because it's Juvia's Place. I did do one look with this palette and I hated it. I'm going to be honest. I hated it. And I just feel like maybe, I don't know what it is. Maybe they're too warm. Maybe Give Me Glow. They have a neutral palette. It's not all matte, but they have a neutral palette called the Grunge palette. And that palette really speaks to me. And I think it's because the neutrals in that palette are a little cooler than the neutrals in this palette. So yeah, this one is, it's just not my favorite. Next up is another fairly neutral palette from Juvia's Place, and it's the Nubian 2 palette. And again, another palette that took me a long time to purchase because for the most part it's a neutral palette, and I'm like, okay. Now this palette has some beautiful shades in them. Like this green is gorgeous. This plum, this dark plum shade. It's got a lot of nice shadows in it. I don't know, when I open it and I look at it, I want to use like one or two of the shimmer shades, and that's really it. So yeah, this is near the bottom also. So up next is also a more neutral palette from Juvia's. I promise I do have some more neutral palettes that are way further up the list. But yeah, this one is the Saharan 2. Beautiful packaging. Look at that purple. Oh, gorgeous. And the palette inside is really beautiful as well. This shade right here, these two right here are my favorite. This one right here is kind of this dual chrome. It's so special. And then you have this dark one. So I did do a look that, you know, I did like with this palette. And now that I'm looking at it again, I'm like, I really need to use this palette more because even this like peachy shade here is gorgeous. This blue, really pretty. So yeah, I'm gonna have to pull this out of the drawer and use it some more. Number 12 is an oldie but a goodie. It's the Masquerade by Juvia's, and I believe this is, no, I was gonna say this is my very first palette from Juvia's Place. I believe it was my second palette that I ever purchased from Juvia's Place. And this is the Masquerade, for any of you that have forgotten what it looks like, because she's an old one now. She's been around, she's a vet, she's been around the block a few times. And this palette, clearly you can see why this palette ranks higher, because of these two rows right here that are the beautiful, bright, bold shimmers. This right here, nice if you want neutrals. You got them all there. You got them here mixed up with your really colorful shades, but it's these It's these shimmers that make this palette so special. When I want to do a look and I'm sure I want to use shadows that I'm sure are going to give me the look that I'm going for, this palette never lets me down. Number 11 is also from the Saharan series, and it's the original Saharan palette, the Saharan. And this is what she looks like. And she's smaller. She's one of the smaller pan palettes, and the pans inside are smaller. These pans are just more like your average size pans as opposed to the really big pans Juvia's usually does. And yeah, this palette is special because of this shade right here, Sokoto. It's just, I think it's probably the brightest. At that point in my makeup journey, it was probably the brightest eyeshadow I had ever used up to that point. And it's gorgeous. I did one of my most favorite looks with this palette. The pinks, I used the pinks, and it just, it's a beautiful, beautiful palette. But it can be challenging when you first open it up to think about, okay, what can I do using this as just a standalone palette? But it's definitely got shadows in it that you can combine with other palettes, and it's got a nice neutral shade here. It's got a black. You can combine with other palettes to make a full beautiful look. So love this palette. The older palettes I don't use very much anymore, if at all, to be honest, but they still have a special place in my heart. Number 10. We are more than halfway through already. This is great. Moving right along. Number 10 in the collection is the Magic Pallets, another big one. And this palette, so gorgeous. This palette, now this palette is one of the palettes that has some of the duds, in my opinion. This shade right here, this purple, and this blue, so gorgeous in the pan, so freaking gorgeous. But when I use them, just, it, you know, it was it was difficult getting them to adhere to my lids, and it was difficult building it up. So those two shades for me are the disappointing ones in this palette, as well as in my whole Juvia's Place collection. But this shade right here, Faso, this duochrome blue, purple, lilac, oh, just gorgeous. You want to do a sexy, sultry, grown folk smoky eye, you can definitely achieve that with the Magic palette. Palette number 9 is a newer acquisition to my collection, and it is the Zulu. And this palette I've always been interested in, but I never purchased because I'm like, oh, I have all those shades already in all my Juvia's Place palettes. I did a look with this palette that I really enjoyed as well, and this has some beautiful shimmer shades in it, these blues and this green, and the matte shades are really pretty, this yellow and this orange. I mean, this is a gorgeous palette. It's a beautiful palette, and it took me a long time to get it, but now that I have it, I'm so glad she's joined our family. Number 8 might surprise you. I told you there were some higher placed neutral palettes in my collection, and this is one of them. This is the original Warrior palette, and surprising to me, she's just gorgeous. I mean, what more is there to say? If you want a gold look, this is actually the palette that has kept me from purchasing the Natasha Denona gold palette. Although, you know, that palette has more shades in it, and it has a beautiful teal matte shade. And this one is predominantly, it's the majority of it are shimmer metallic shades. But this to me has all the golds I need, to be honest. What's not to love about this palette? So that's why this neutral palette got such a high ranking. Number 7 is also a neutral palette. It is the original Juvia's Place palette. It is the first palette I ever purchased from Juvia's Place, and it's the original Nubian. And look how small this palette is. When it first came out, this is Juvia's Place first palette, and this was the little tiny palette that they made. But oh my goodness, is she not beautiful? When I first started off in eyeshadow, in my eyeshadow journey, I was into neutrals. I did predominantly neutral, probably all neutral shades, because I was afraid to dabble in color. I wasn't used to seeing myself in eyeshadow and then seeing colorful eyeshadow on myself, and then the fact that I was just learning, so I wasn't very good. So I stuck to neutrals, and that's what helped me gradually build my confidence and then move into the more colorful, bright, bold, in your face eyeshadow colors. You're looking for a whole one and done neutral palette, don't sleep on the original Nubian palette from Juvia's, because it's a beautiful palette, and I'm going to need to bring it out some more and use it, because you can't go wrong with this palette. You can't go wrong. Everyday look, workday look, evening look, you can do it all with that palette. Number 6, we're going to get into the minis, and this is the Chocolates mini palette. Juvia's Place came out, I think it was at the first of this year, with their mini palette collection. And when I first saw the chocolates, I was like, it's a neutral palette, like I do with most neutral palettes. But the tones in here are so rich, and you do have some cooler matte shades that I like. And then you have this cooler metallic shade, and then a warmer metallic shade. You have a crease shade under the brow, highlight shade, and then you have this warm milk chocolate matte shade. I mean, they really did a good job curating these palettes. The one caveat about this palette, if I'm being nitpicky, these two shades right here are very, very similar. Too similar in my opinion. But yes, this is another one of those palettes if you want to do an everyday work day look, if you want to do a neutral look, if you want to do something sexy and sultry, and you just want to pick one palette and be done with it. The Chocolates. Love it. Number 5 is another mini, and this one is the Violets. Purple, you know I love me some purple. And this is another wonderfully curated mini palette. Only 6 pans, but you can do a full look with these 6 pans. I love that it has this lilac shade and then these beautiful shimmer metallic shades. This palette has only 2 matte shades, but the matte shades that they've chosen is really dark one. You have a deepening shade for contrast, for depth, and yeah, it's beautiful. Again, this shade right here to me doesn't really fit in the purple theme if I'm being nitpicky, but you can certainly do a beautiful violet purple look using just this palette, and that's why it ranks so high on my list. All right, now we are getting to the nitty and the gritty. The top 5 palettes that I ranked as my top 5 Juvia's Place palettes. Number 5, can you guess what the top 5 are? Can you guess? Pause a moment and list what you think they are in the comments. Let's see how close you come. Let's see if you're right. Number 5, a newer acquisition, and it's the Nomad. And this palette is, for me, a wonderful grunge palette. I like grunge. I really do. I might not look like the type that likes grungy looks, but I do. And this, to me, is a grungy palette, and I loves it. This one was a tough one. The top 5 was tough. This is the Berries mini palette, and I love a pink eyeshadow, and I love a berry. And this shade right here was the reason why I bought this palette. Was the sole reason I bought this palette, and it has not let me down. And then you've got, I mean, again, another wonderfully curated palette. The only one that I don't think, again, if I'm nitpicking, really goes in this palette is this one right here. And because it's a lot more red. It's more red than it is berry or pink. So that's the only, if I'm nitpicking, that's the only shadow I would have left out. Probably would have done another shimmer. A lighter pink shimmer is what I would have put in this palette to replace that one. But with that shade aside, this is a beautiful palette. Again, another one and done, when you can come in and just do one look, quick look with just this palette. All right, we're down to just 2 palettes. My peeps know which one is number 1. I know you already know which is number 1. But number 2 surprised me, actually. It's another neutral palette. And who knew that a neutral palette would rank so high in my rankings? But this neutral palette has. It's broken all barriers. And it is a recent addition to my collection as well. It is the Nubian 3, the Coral palette. And I like having the versatility of having grays in this palette, because you can do something completely different. If you don't want to do coral, you don't want to do like a neutral brown look, you can do a beautiful gray look. This palette is one, when I open it up, I'm immediately inspired, and I see several different looks. I see so many of these shadows that I want to use. So this was a nice purchase. It took me quite a long time to finally purchase it, but now that I have it, I'm so glad I do. And last but not least, drum roll please. Okay, no drum roll. You all know what it is. Number 1, my favorite Juvia's Place palette thus far. Are we surprised? It's the Tribe palette. I've only said it's my favorite Juvia's Place palette in how many videos? It's the Tribe, and the green on the outside of the packaging matches the shadows on the inside of the packaging. I did my all-time most favorite look with this palette right here. Who knew I like green eyeshadow as much as I do? But I do. And this palette, look at this. This green right here. Look at that. You've got this bright orange. You've got another darker orange metallic shade. This one right here, this green. And this one. Oh, this dirty, grungy, another like mustard green shade. Just so. And then this one, my absolute favorite one in this palette. One of my absolute favorite eyeshadows of all time. I'm actually wearing it in my inner corner today. This is this dual chrome. It looks gold in the palette. And then when you swatch it, or when you put it on your face, you see, surprise, it's got green in it. Like they committed to this green theme for this palette, and I just love it. I love it. I love it. Definitely by far not only my favorite Juvia's Place palettes, but definitely one of my favorite palettes in the entirety of my eyeshadow palette collection. Okay, so that was fun. It was hard. I'm not gonna lie. I thought it would be hard. It wasn't as hard as I thought it was gonna be, but it was definitely hard, especially when it came down to like the top 10 palettes. And tomorrow, if I were to do the same video, it would probably be different. There'd probably be little tweaks in it, little changes. But today, that's how I'm ranking all of my Juvia's Place palettes. Please let me know your palettes. Which one is your favorite Juvia's Place palette? Which one is your least favorite Juvia's Place palette? If you liked this video, then please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing, because I do these types of videos along with makeup hauls, swatches, reviews, and tutorials every Saturday. I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope to see you again next week. Until then, bye-bye.